In a striking development that underscores the rising tensions between critics of the Chinese government and its overseas supporters, U.S. authorities have arrested 2 foreign nationals accused of orchestrating a campaign of harassment against a Los Angeles-based critic of Chinese President Xi Jinping. The arrests made public by the U.S. Justice Department highlight the lengths to which some individuals may go to intimidate dissenters, particularly in an age where international relations are increasingly fraught. Cui Guanghai, 43, from China, and John Miller, 63, from the United Kingdom were apprehended in Serbia at the behest of U.S. law enforcement. According to a federal complaint, their alleged campaign against the unnamed victim began as early as October 2023. Coinciding with a time when the victim was outspoken against President Xi's policies and planned to protest his appearance at the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation APEC Summit in San Francisco. The complaint details a bizarre and alarming series of actions orchestrated by Cui and Miller, who reportedly hired individuals in the U.S. to surveil the victim, install a tracking device on his car, and even slash its tires. Additionally, they allegedly directed the purchase and destruction of 2 statues the victim had created which depicted Xi and his wife. Notably, the suspects were unaware that the individuals they hired were actually working under the direction of the FBI. A fact that adds a layer of intrigue to the case. Federal prosecutors indicated that a similar scheme unfolded in the spring of 2025 when the victim announced the intention to showcase new artistic depictions of Xi and his wife. This time, Cui and Miller are alleged to have paid about $36,500 to individuals who were once again operating under FBI supervision, further complicating their already precarious situation. The legal stakes are high for Cui and Miller, each facing up to 10 years in prison if convicted on charges of conspiracy and interstate stalking. U.S. authorities have also indicated plans to pursue extradition for both suspects, emphasizing the seriousness with which they view this case. The implications of this incident extend beyond the immediate legal repercussions for the individuals involved. It reflects a broader pattern of intimidation tactics employed by supporters of the Chinese government against dissidents, particularly those residing overseas. This trend poses significant questions about free speech and the lengths to which foreign governments may go to quash dissent. As tensions between the U.S. and China continue to simmer, particularly over issues of trade and human rights, incidents like this serve as a stark reminder of the ongoing struggle between authoritarian regimes and the advocates for democratic values. With both nations entrenched in their positions, the international community watches closely to see how these dynamics will evolve and whether the principles of free expression will prevail in an increasingly polarized global landscape. Future developments in this case could set important precedents for how such incidents are handled and may influence broader discussions on the role of international law in protecting dissenters worldwide. In a world where trade relationships can dictate the course of economies and political landscapes, the ongoing trade tensions between the United States and China remain a focal point for analysts and policymakers alike. Recently, former President Donald Trump's claims of engaging in negotiations with Chinese President Xi Jinping have been met with outright denial from Chinese officials, creating a further sense of uncertainty in financial markets already on edge. On April 25, 2025, Trump asserted in an interview that he had been in contact with Xi and that discussions regarding tariffs were underway. This statement was a strategic move seemingly aimed at calming jittery investors, as the S&P 500 has fallen by 10% since Trump's inauguration on January 20. However, Chinese authorities quickly countered these claims, with Cui Guanghai, a spokesperson for China's foreign ministry, stating unequivocally China and the U.S. have not held consultations or negotiations on the issue of tariffs, emphasizing that the United States should not confuse the public. The discord between the two nations reflects a broader impasse that has enveloped trade relations, particularly following Trump's decision to increase tariffs on Chinese imports to a staggering minimum of 145%. The Chinese response was immediate, imposing their own tariffs on American goods and restricting exports of critical materials needed for various industries, including defense. The fallout has rippled through supply chains, affecting businesses that rely heavily on Chinese products, from hardware stores to toy manufacturers, many of which have had to cease shipments amid the escalating tensions. Trump's administration has faced significant internal pressures as well, with economic advisors warning of dire consequences if the trade war continues unchecked. Reports indicate that major retailers have informed Trump about potential shortages and the risk of empty shelves if tariffs remain. This has prompted discussions within the administration about the sustainability of the current trade posture, with some officials advocating for a re-evaluation of tariff strategies. However, the White House has firmly stated that any concessions would depend on reciprocal actions from China. The divergence in narrative has not only created a complex web of diplomatic challenges but has also impacted Trump's approval ratings, particularly concerning economic performance, a traditionally strong point for his administration. As concerns grow among Republican lawmakers regarding the implications for the 2026 midterm elections, the pressure mounts on Trump to find a viable solution to the trade standoff. Ishwar Prasad, a trade policy professor at Cornell University, notes that both the U.S. and China recognize the necessity of negotiations, but both sides are reluctant to initiate talks without first establishing favorable terms. The Chinese government has been steadfast in its position that any discussions must occur on a level of mutual respect, pushing back against what they perceive as Trump's bullying tactics. As the trade war continues to unfold, the potential for a resolution remains in question. Analysts suggest that the balance of power may be shifting, with Beijing increasingly confident in its ability to withstand economic pressure, viewing the situation as one that the U.S. economy may suffer from more acutely. The ongoing tensions not only pose risks to the economies involved but also threaten to reshape global trade dynamics in profound ways. Looking ahead, the situation is fraught with uncertainty. Whether Trump will succeed in negotiating a favorable trade deal with China, or whether the current trajectory will lead to an even deeper rift, remains to be seen. As both nations navigate this complex landscape, the implications for global trade, economic stability, and international relations are significant, making this a critical moment in U.S. China relations that warrants close attention in the months to come. In a turbulent landscape of global trade, the ongoing tensions between the United States and China have reached a critical juncture. President Donald Trump recently claimed in an interview with Time magazine that he had been in contact with Chinese President Xi Jinping regarding tariffs, suggesting that trade negotiations were progressing. However, Chinese officials swiftly countered these assertions, insisting that no active discussions were taking place. This discord highlights the complexities and uncertainties surrounding the two nations' economic relationship, as both sides grapple with the implications of their escalating trade war. Trump's remarks came during a period when the U.S. had imposed steep tariffs, reaching as high as 145% on a range of Chinese imports, a move designed to pressure Beijing into compliance on various trade issues. The Chinese government responded with its own set of tariffs set at 125% and emphasized that any negotiations would require a rollback of the tariffs imposed by the U.S. Cui Guanghai, spokesperson for China's foreign ministry, firmly stated, "For all I know, China and the U.S. are not having any consultation or negotiation on tariffs, still less reaching a deal." This stark contradiction has left markets and analysts questioning the validity of Trump's claims and the future of U.S.-China trade relations. Despite the conflicting narratives, Trump has maintained an optimistic stance, suggesting that a resolution could be on the horizon. "There's a number at which they will feel comfortable," he told Time, indicating his belief that a deal could be finalized in the near future. Yet Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent's comments on separate negotiations with South Korea seem to complicate the administration's messaging further, as he expressed optimism about striking a deal without providing clarity on the broader situation with China. The situation is further complicated by the geopolitical backdrop of the trade conflict. As China grapples with the impact of tariffs on its economy, Xi Jinping has called for the nation to enhance its self-reliance in technological sectors, particularly in artificial intelligence and semiconductor manufacturing. During a recent Politburo meeting, Xi stressed the need to overcome challenges in core technologies. indicating that the trade standoff with the U.S. could hinder China's ambitions in these critical areas. The World Bank's President Ajay Banga has also weighed in on the broader implications of U.S. trade policy, urging developing nations to quickly negotiate trade agreements with the U.S. to mitigate the impact of Trump's unpredictable trade strategies. Banga's comments underscore a growing concern among global economic leaders about the ramifications of the ongoing trade war, which has already unsettled markets and strained investor confidence. In the wake of these developments, Trump appears to be playing a dual role of negotiator and provocateur. While he projects confidence in the potential for a fair deal with China, his administration's mixed messages and the stark denial from Chinese officials suggest a profound disconnect between intention and reality. As tensions mount, the need for constructive dialogue based on mutual respect becomes increasingly vital. Looking ahead, the path to de-escalation will likely require significant concessions from both sides. Analysts have noted that while the U.S. economy may be feeling the effects of the trade war more acutely, China's resilience and strategic positioning could enable it to weather the current storm. The stakes are high. Not only does the outcome of this trade dispute hold implications for the two largest economies, but it also shapes the dynamics of global trade and economic policy for years to come. As both nations navigate this complex terrain, the world watches closely, hoping for a resolution that favors collaboration over continued conflict. In a striking development that underscores the complexity of U.S. China trade relations, President Donald Trump has claimed that he is in communication with Chinese President Xi Jinping regarding tariffs, a statement that was promptly refuted by Chinese officials. This discord highlights the ongoing tensions between the two economic powerhouses, exacerbated by Trump's aggressive tariff policies and the resulting instability in global markets. On April 25, 2025, President Trump asserted that his administration was actively negotiating with China to resolve trade disputes, stating in an interview with Time that he and Xi had engaged in numerous conversations. However, Chinese officials quickly countered these claims, with Cui Guanghai, spokesperson for China's foreign ministry, stating, "China and the U.S. have not held consultations or negotiations on the issue of tariffs." He urged the U.S. to refrain from creating misinformation and confusion. This contradictory narrative is not new. It reflects a broader pattern in which both nations seem to be framing the trade dialogue in ways that suit their respective domestic political narratives. The backdrop to this exchange is a souring economic climate, with the S&P 500 index plummeting 10% since Trump's inauguration in January 2025. Market jitters are attributed to fears that the trade war could spiral further, disrupting supply chains and affecting American businesses that rely on Chinese imports. Trump's administration has imposed tariffs on Chinese goods, with rates soaring as high as 145%. In response, China has retaliated with its own tariffs on American products and restricted exports of critical materials, further complicating the economic landscape. Despite the president's optimistic rhetoric that we're doing fine with everybody, his administration appears to be grappling with the realities of a trade war that has significant implications for U.S. retailers and consumers. Reports indicate that major retailers are anticipating empty shelves if tariffs remain in place, leading to internal discussions within the Trump administration about potentially easing tariff rates to alleviate pressure on American businesses. This acknowledgement of the unsustainable status quo raises questions about the effectiveness of the current strategy and the potential need for a recalibration in negotiations. As the situation unfolds, experts are increasingly skeptical about the prospects of a swift resolution. Ishwar Prasad, a professor of trade policy at Cornell University, observed that both countries are aware of the necessity to negotiate, yet both are entrenched in their positions, seeking to retain leverage in the conversation. The narrative in Beijing seems to have shifted in recent days, with policymakers there stiffening their backs and feeling that they can ride this out, Prasad remarked. Compounding these challenges for Trump is the declining public sentiment regarding his handling of the economy. Polling data indicates that his approval ratings have dipped, with Republican lawmakers expressing concern over potential losses in the upcoming 2026 midterm elections. This political pressure adds another layer of urgency to the administration's efforts to secure a favorable trade deal, as both sides are acutely aware of the economic stakes involved. While Trump continues to assert that his tariffs are yielding financial benefits, economists caution that these costs will ultimately be borne by American consumers, undermining the administration's claims of financial gain from the tariffs. As the discourse around U.S. China trade becomes increasingly fraught, the absence of genuine dialogue raises the specter of further escalation, with both nations seemingly locked in a standoff characterized by posturing rather than productive negotiation. Looking ahead, the trajectory of U.S. China trade relations remains uncertain. With both leaders entrenched in their respective positions, the potential for a breakthrough appears limited unless a shift occurs in the tone and substance of their communications. As market analysts and businesses await clarity, the ongoing trade tensions serve as a stark reminder of the intricate interplay between diplomacy and economic policy in an increasingly interconnected world. The coming weeks and months will be critical in determining whether the two nations can navigate this impasse or if the trade war will deepen with far-reaching consequences for the global economy. Chinese President Xi Jinping's recent tour of Southeast Asia, encompassing Vietnam, Malaysia, and Cambodia, has underscored a significant shift in China's diplomatic approach towards its neighbors. This trip, marking his first overseas engagement of 2025, signals a renewed commitment to fostering regional unity and addressing economic challenges exacerbated by rising protectionism, particularly from the United States under President Donald Trump. The essence of this diplomatic endeavor is encapsulated in a Chinese proverb: "A relative far away is not as helpful as a neighbor close by." This sentiment reflects a long-standing cultural philosophy that values close relationships with neighboring countries. For Xi, this trip was not merely a series of meetings, it was a reaffirmation of China's dedication to promoting amity, sincerity, mutual benefit, and inclusiveness in its foreign policy, a principle deeply rooted in China's civilizational history. During his visit, Xi emphasized the importance of regional cooperation, urging Southeast Asian nations to unite against external pressures and avoid the pitfalls of unilateralism and protectionism. In a series of discussions, he articulated a vision for a harmonious neighborhood that prioritizes shared prosperity and mutual respect. "Today we must stand together to reject unilateral bullying and embrace the spirit of good neighborliness," Xi remarked, highlighting the need for solidarity in the face of global economic uncertainties. China's strategic pivot towards its immediate neighbors is also a response to the geopolitical landscape shaped by Trump's administration, which has adopted a more aggressive stance in trade relations, sparking trade tensions that have reverberated across the region. With tariffs and protectionist measures taking center stage, Beijing is seeking to solidify its influence in Southeast Asia as a counterweight to U.S. policies. In response to these evolving dynamics, China convened a high-level conference focusing on its neighboring countries, the first of its kind since 2013. The outcomes were clear: Southeast Asia is a diplomatic priority for China. The discussions reaffirmed the importance of dialogue and trust-building in managing territorial disputes and enhancing bilateral relations. The implications of Xi's visit extend beyond immediate diplomatic gestures. As Southeast Asia grapples with the fallout from U.S. protectionism, the region's leaders are being called upon to reassess their own foreign policies in light of China's renewed assertiveness. For countries like the Philippines, the challenge lies in navigating this complex landscape. The Philippines, as the sole U.S. treaty ally in the region, faces the dual task of maintaining its strategic partnership with Washington while also engaging with a more assertive Beijing. As Xi's outreach continues, the future of China's neighborhood diplomacy will likely hinge on its ability to foster genuine partnerships that can withstand external pressures. The focus on regional stability and economic cooperation may offer opportunities for Manila and its Southeast Asian neighbors to recalibrate their diplomatic strategies. Looking ahead, it will be crucial for Southeast Asian nations to strike a balance between their long-standing ties with the United States and the burgeoning influence of China. As Beijing continues to assert its role as a regional leader, the responses of these nations will shape the diplomatic landscape of Southeast Asia for years to come, highlighting the importance of strategic engagement in an increasingly multipolar world.